Alan Turing's early brilliance and mathematical genius did not appear suddenly or by accident. They developed gradually through a combination of natural ability, curiosity, and an unusual way of thinking about the world. From a very young age, Turing showed signs of a mind that worked differently from those around him. He was not merely good at memorizing facts or following instructions, but deeply interested in understanding how things worked at their most basic level. This quality would define his entire life and become the foundation of his later achievements. Alan Matheson Turing was born on June 23, 1912, in London, England. His parents were members of the British Civil Service, and like many families of that era, they spent significant time abroad. As a result, Turing experienced periods of separation from his parents during childhood, which may have contributed to his independence and introspective nature. From early on, he was known as a quiet and thoughtful child, often absorbed in his own ideas. Rather than seeking constant social interaction, he preferred puzzles, experiments, and solitary thinking. One of the most striking features of Turing's early years was his strong attraction to numbers and patterns. While many children struggled with mathematics, Turing seemed to find it natural and even enjoyable. He did not simply apply formulas given by teachers. Instead, he questioned why those formulas worked. If he encountered a concept he did not understand, he would attempt to rediscover it on his own through logic and experimentation. This habit of independent reasoning was unusual and sometimes misunderstood by teachers, but it was a clear sign of his exceptional intellect. Turing's schooling further revealed his unique talents. He attended several schools during his childhood, but his most formative years were spent at Sherborne School, a well-known British boarding school that emphasized classical education, literature, and tradition. Unfortunately, Sherborne was not particularly supportive of scientific or mathematical creativity. The school valued conformity and discipline, while Turing valued curiosity and logical exploration. As a result, he was often seen as odd or absent, minded by his peers and teachers. Despite this lack of encouragement, Turing's passion for mathematics and science continued to grow. He spent his free time conducting experiments, reading advanced scientific texts, and solving complex problems far beyond the school curriculum. There are well-known stories of Turing teaching himself advanced mathematics, including calculus, without formal instruction. He would work through problems step by step, relying on logic rather than memorization. This self-directed learning demonstrated not only intelligence, but also determination and confidence in his own reasoning abilities. Another important aspect of Turing's early brilliance was his ability to think abstractly. While many people struggle to imagine ideas that cannot be directly seen or touched, Turing was comfortable working with pure concepts. He could visualize mathematical structures and logical systems in his mind, manipulating them as easily as physical objects. This skill later became essential to his work in theoretical mathematics and computing, but its roots were clearly visible during his school years. Turing's intellectual development was also influenced by his interest in science beyond mathematics. He was fascinated by chemistry, physics, and biology, often performing small experiments on his own. This broad scientific curiosity allowed him to see connections between different fields, rather than treating them as isolated subjects. For Turing, knowledge was a unified system governed by logical rules, and this belief shaped his approach to problem solving throughout his life. A significant emotional and intellectual influence during Turing's teenage years was his friendship with a fellow student named Christopher Morcom. Morcom was intelligent, kind, and shared Turing's interest in science and mathematics. Their friendship encouraged Turing to pursue his academic passions more seriously and gave him a sense of belonging that he had often lacked. Together, they discussed scientific ideas, exchanged thoughts, and inspired one another to think deeply about the nature of the universe. The loss of this close friend had a profound impact on Turing, both personally and intellectually. It pushed him to reflect on questions about life, consciousness, and the laws governing nature. Rather than turning away from science, Turing immersed himself even more deeply in it, seeking logical explanations for complex realities. This period of reflection strengthened his belief that the universe could be understood through mathematical and logical principles, a belief that became central to his later work. After completing his early schooling, Turing went on to study at King's College, Cambridge, one of the world's most prestigious universities. His admission alone was evidence of his exceptional abilities, but it was during his time at Cambridge that his genius truly became visible to the academic world. At university, Turing finally found an environment where deep thinking and originality were valued rather than discouraged. At Cambridge, Turing quickly distinguished himself as a remarkable student. He was not content with solving existing problems. He wanted to ask new questions. His work in mathematics focused on logic, probability, and the foundations of computation. Professors recognized that Turing possessed a rare ability to approach complex problems from entirely new angles. While others followed established methods, Turing often created his own paths to solutions. One of the key features of Turing's brilliance was his fearless approach to difficult ideas. He was not intimidated by problems that others considered unsolvable. Instead, he viewed them as challenges that required careful thought and creativity. This attitude allowed him to make progress in areas where many others had failed. His confidence did not come from arrogance, but from trust in logical reasoning and evidence. Turing's early academic success was recognized when he was elected a Fellow of King's College at a young age, a rare honor that confirmed his status as an outstanding mathematician. This achievement was not the result of years of published work, but of original ideas that demonstrated deep understanding and innovation. His research showed that he was already thinking beyond traditional mathematics and moving toward questions that would define the future of science and technology. Perhaps the most important outcome of Turing's early brilliance was the development of his unique way of thinking about machines and logic. Even before the invention of modern computers, Turing began to imagine machines that could follow logical instructions to perform tasks. He was interested not just in what machines could do, but in what it meant for a process to be computable at all. This line of thinking required extraordinary abstraction and imagination, qualities that had been developing since his childhood. Alan Turing's early brilliance did not stop with his first major successes at Cambridge. Instead, it deepened and matured as his thinking became more disciplined and more daring. What made Turing truly exceptional was not just his intelligence, but the way his mind moved naturally toward fundamental questions. He was never satisfied with surface-level explanations. He wanted to know what lay underneath mathematical rules, logical systems, and even human thought itself. This relentless curiosity pushed him toward ideas that were far ahead of his time. During his later years at Cambridge, Turing became increasingly interested in mathematical logic, a field concerned with the structure of reasoning itself. At the time, mathematicians were struggling with deep questions about the limits of mathematics. One of the most important problems was whether every mathematical statement could, in principle, be proven true or false using a fixed set of rules. This challenge fascinated Turing because it combined logic, structure, and the idea of process, all of which appealed strongly to his way of thinking. Rather than approaching these questions in a traditional abstract way, Turing did something unusual. He began thinking about logic as a kind of mechanical process. He asked himself what it would mean for a calculation to be carried out step by step, without creativity or intuition, purely by following rules. This shift in perspective was revolutionary. Instead of focusing only on mathematical symbols, he imagined an idealized machine that could manipulate those symbols according to precise instructions. This idea led to one of the most important intellectual breakthroughs of the 20th century. Turing described a simple theoretical device that could read symbols, follow instructions, and produce results. Though extremely basic in structure, this imaginary machine was capable of performing any calculation that could be described as a sequence of logical steps. This concept later became known as the Turing machine. At the time, it existed only on paper, but its implications were enormous. What made this achievement so remarkable was that Turing developed it largely through reasoning alone. There were no physical computers to inspire him, no digital screens or processors. His ideas came directly from his ability to imagine processes in the abstract and test them logically in his mind. This was a clear continuation of the habits he had formed as a child, when he preferred discovering rules for himself rather than accepting them without question. Turing's work demonstrated that there were limits to what could be computed mechanically. Some problems, he showed, could never be solved by any machine following fixed rules, no matter how powerful. This insight answered long-standing questions in mathematics and reshaped the understanding of what computation truly meant. It was a perfect example of how Turing's early brilliance had evolved into deep intellectual power. He did not just solve problems, he defined the boundaries of entire fields. Another important aspect of Turing's genius was his willingness to challenge established authority. Many mathematicians of his era followed traditional schools of thought and were cautious about radical ideas. Turing, however, was guided by logic rather than reputation. If an idea made sense to him logically, he pursued it, even if it went against accepted beliefs. This independence of thought, visible since his school days, became one of his greatest strengths. After Cambridge, Turing continued his studies at Princeton University in the United States, where he worked with leading logicians of the time. Even in this highly competitive environment, he stood out for his originality. While others refined existing theories, Turing continued to explore new ways of thinking about machines, numbers, and reasoning. His work during this period further strengthened his reputation as a thinker of rare depth and creativity. Despite his intellectual success, Turing remained personally modest and socially unconventional. He was often uninterested in academic status or recognition, focusing instead on ideas themselves. This quality sometimes made him seem distant or unusual to others, but it also allowed him to think freely without being constrained by expectations. His mind was always focused on understanding, not impressing. Turing's mathematical genius was closely linked to his visual imagination. He often thought in terms of processes unfolding over time, rather than static equations on a page. This dynamic way of thinking helped him bridge the gap between abstract logic and practical mechanisms. It also explains why his ideas later translated so naturally into real machines during the development of early computers. As his thinking matured, Turing began to consider not only whether machines could calculate, but whether they could simulate aspects of human thinking. This question grew naturally from his earlier work. If human reasoning followed logical steps, he wondered, could those steps be reproduced by a machine? This was not a philosophical curiosity alone. It was a logical extension of his belief that complex systems could arise from simple rules. This line of thought showed how far Turing's early brilliance had taken him. From a child fascinated by patterns, he had become a thinker capable of questioning the nature of intelligence itself. His genius was not limited to one discovery or one discipline. It was a way of seeing the world as something that could be understood through structure, logic, and careful reasoning. Even before his wartime achievements, Turing had already reshaped mathematics and logic in ways that would influence generations to come. The concepts he developed during his early academic career became the intellectual foundation of computer science, long before the field officially existed. This is perhaps the clearest evidence of his extraordinary mind. He was building the future using tools that most people had not yet imagined. In reflecting on Alan Turing's early brilliance and mathematical genius, it becomes clear that his achievements were not sudden miracles, but the result of a lifetime of disciplined curiosity. From his childhood experiments to his groundbreaking theories, every stage of his development contributed to the thinker he became. His ability to combine imagination with logic, independence with rigor, and abstraction with practical insight made him one of the most influential minds in human history. This early phase of Turing's life shows us that genius is not only about talent, but about persistence, curiosity, and the courage to think differently. Long before he cracked the Enigma code or helped shape the digital age, Alan Turing had already changed the way humanity understood thinking, machines, and the power of the human mind itself. The outbreak of the Second World War marked a turning point not only in global history, but also in the life of Alan Turing. By the late 1930s, Europe was moving steadily toward conflict, and nations understood that warfare was no longer fought only on land, sea, and air. Information had become a weapon. Secret messages, military orders, and strategic plans were transmitted constantly, and the ability to protect or uncover these communications could determine victory or defeat. It was within this high-stakes environment that the Enigma challenge emerged, and Alan Turing's unique abilities became critically important. Germany relied heavily on encrypted radio communications to coordinate its military forces. At the heart of this system was the Enigma machine, an electromechanical device that transformed plain text into seemingly random strings of letters. To anyone intercepting these messages, they appeared meaningless. What made Enigma especially powerful was its complexity. The machine used rotating components and internal wiring that changed the encryption with every keystroke. On top of that, operators altered the machine's settings daily, creating an enormous number of possible combinations. To German commanders, Enigma seemed unbreakable. The British government, however, knew that allowing German communications to remain secret would be disastrous. Early in the war, British intelligence established that vast amounts of enemy radio traffic were being intercepted, but could not be understood. This created an urgent problem: how to turn intercepted signals into usable intelligence quickly enough to matter. Traditional codebreaking methods were far too slow. The Enigma system generated more possible settings than any team of humans could test by hand in a reasonable time. A new approach was required, one that combined mathematical insight with mechanical speed. Alan Turing was recruited into this effort because of his exceptional background in mathematics and logic. By the time war began, he had already developed a reputation as a brilliant and unconventional thinker. He was not a soldier in the traditional sense, but his mind was ideally suited to a war that depended on logic, patterns, and problem-solving. Turing joined Britain's Codebreaking Centre at Bletchley Park, a quiet country estate that quickly became one of the most important secret locations of the war. At Bletchley Park, Turing was confronted with the full scale of the Enigma challenge. The German military used several versions of the Enigma machine, each with its own complexities. Messages were sent constantly, and even if yesterday's code had been broken, today's settings rendered that work useless. Time pressure was relentless. Information was only valuable if it could be decrypted quickly, sometimes within hours. This environment demanded not only intelligence, but endurance, creativity, and the ability to work under extreme secrecy. Turing approached the problem differently from many others. Instead of trying to break individual messages one by one, he focused on understanding the underlying logic of the Enigma system itself. He analyzed how the machine transformed letters and how its components interacted. By treating Enigma as a logical system rather than a mysterious device, he began to identify weaknesses that could be exploited. This approach reflected his earlier academic work, where he had learned to reduce complex problems to their fundamental rules. One of Turing's key insights was recognizing that human habits could undermine even the strongest encryption. German operators, despite strict procedures, often followed predictable patterns. They reused certain phrases, made small errors, or followed routines that could be anticipated. Turing realized that if these predictable elements could be identified, they could serve as entry points into the code. These known or guessed pieces of text became critical tools in the effort to crack Enigma. To exploit these weaknesses, Turing helped design a new kind of machine. Rather than decrypting messages directly, this device would rapidly test possible Enigma settings against logical constraints. If a setting produced contradictions, it could be eliminated immediately. By automating this process, thousands of possibilities could be tested far faster than any human team. This machine represented a new fusion of theory and engineering, turning abstract logic into physical action. The development and use of these machines transformed the code-breaking effort. What once seemed impossible became achievable through systematic testing and logical elimination. Turing's contribution was not just technical, but conceptual. He had effectively reframed the problem of code-breaking as a question of computation. This shift in perspective was revolutionary and laid the groundwork for later advances in computing technology. Life at Bletchley Park was intense and demanding. The work was carried out under strict secrecy, with severe consequences for any breach. Many of the people working there had no idea of the full impact of their efforts. Turing himself was known for his intense focus, long hours, and unconventional habits. He cared little for formalities, often appearing absent-minded, but his colleagues recognized his brilliance and relied heavily on his ideas. As the war progressed, the importance of the Enigma breakthrough became increasingly clear. Decoded messages provided vital information about enemy movements, naval operations, and strategic intentions. This intelligence helped protect supply routes, guide military decisions, and avoid ambushes. While those on the battlefield rarely knew it, many of their successes were influenced by information that originated from code-breaking efforts led by minds like Turing's. What makes this period especially significant is that Turing was not merely reacting to events. He was shaping an entirely new way of fighting war. The Enigma challenge forced intelligence agencies to think in terms of systems, automation, and speed. Turing's work showed that wars could be influenced by logic as much as by weapons. This realization changed military strategy permanently and highlighted the growing importance of information in global conflict. The pressure of wartime work was immense, and yet Turing thrived intellectually under these conditions. The urgency of the situation demanded clear thinking and bold decisions. Every success reinforced the idea that abstract reasoning could have real-world consequences. For Turing, this was not just a professional challenge, but a profound confirmation of his belief in the power of logic and computation. By the middle of the war, the Enigma challenge had evolved into a continuous battle of adaptation. As the Allies improved their ability to read German messages, German engineers introduced new variations and security measures. Each change required fresh analysis and new solutions. Turing remained deeply involved in this ongoing struggle, constantly refining methods and anticipating future problems. This phase of Turing's life demonstrates how his earlier brilliance found its ultimate test. The skills he had developed as a student abstract thinking, logical rigor, and independence of thought were now applied under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The Enigma challenge was not just a technical puzzle. It was a race against time with lives at stake. Turing's ability to remain focused and innovative under such pressure was a testament to his extraordinary mind. The Second World War and the Enigma challenge represent more than a chapter in military history. They mark a moment when human intellect confronted seemingly impossible complexity and prevailed. Alan Turing stood at the center of this effort, not as a conventional hero, but as a thinker whose ideas reshaped the battlefield. His work during this period showed that the future of conflict, and indeed of society itself, would be shaped by those who understood information, logic, and machines. This is only the first half of the story of Turing's wartime role. Even within this period, the foundations were being laid for transformations far beyond the war itself. The Enigma challenge forced innovations that would later influence computing, intelligence, and technology on a global scale. In meeting this challenge, Alan Turing proved that intellectual courage and logical clarity could change the course of history. As the war moved into its most critical years, the struggle against Enigma became more complex and more dangerous. German forces did not remain static. They constantly upgraded their encryption systems in response to suspected security risks. New rotors were added, procedures were tightened, and additional layers of encryption were introduced, especially for naval communications. Each improvement threatened to blind Allied intelligence once again. This meant that success at Bletchley Park was never permanent. Every breakthrough carried with it the fear that it might soon be lost. Alan Turing understood this reality better than most. He knew that cracking Enigma once was not enough. The real challenge was maintaining access to German communications without alerting the enemy. If the Germans realized their codes were broken, they would immediately change their systems, undoing years of work. This required extreme caution in how decoded information was used. Military decisions based on Enigma intelligence had to look natural, as if they came from routine reconnaissance rather than secret knowledge. This careful balancing act added another layer of pressure to the codebreakers' work. One of the most critical areas of Enigma decryption involved the Battle of the Atlantic. German submarines posed a serious threat to Allied supply ships carrying food, fuel, and equipment. These submarines relied heavily on encrypted messages to coordinate attacks and avoid patrols. When Enigma messages could be read, Allied forces gained the ability to reroute convoys, hunt submarines, and reduce losses. When decryption failed, ships were sunk in large numbers. The stakes could not have been higher. Turing played an essential role in improving methods for breaking Naval Enigma, which was more secure than other versions. He contributed new logical techniques and refinements that increased the speed and reliability of decryption. These advances were not always dramatic breakthroughs. Often, they were small improvements that saved minutes or hours. Yet in wartime, such time savings could mean the difference between success and disaster. Turing understood that efficiency was just as important as innovation. The environment at Bletchley Park during this period was intense and exhausting. Work continued day and night, with teams operating in shifts to keep pace with the constant flow of intercepted messages. Turing was known for his long working hours and his ability to remain deeply focused even under fatigue. He often became so absorbed in his thoughts that he appeared disconnected from his surroundings. While this sometimes made him seem eccentric, it also allowed him to tackle problems that required sustained concentration. Despite the secrecy surrounding their work, collaboration was essential. Turing worked alongside mathematicians, linguists, engineers, and military analysts. Each brought different skills to the effort, and success depended on combining these talents effectively. Turing's ability to communicate complex ideas clearly, especially through logic rather than authority, made him a key figure within these teams. His respect for evidence and reasoning helped create an atmosphere where ideas could be tested and refined quickly. As the war progressed, the cumulative impact of codebreaking became clearer. Decoded messages provided insight into enemy strategies across Europe and beyond. They revealed troop movements, supply shortages, and internal concerns within the German command. This information helped Allied leaders make informed decisions at critical moments. While victories were often attributed to military strength or leadership, many were quietly shaped by intelligence derived from Enigma decryption. One of the most remarkable aspects of Turing's wartime work was how it anticipated the future. The machines and methods developed to break Enigma were not computers in the modern sense, but they embodied key principles of computation, automation, logical processing, and speed. Turing's earlier theoretical ideas about machines capable of following instructions found a practical application under the pressure of war. This convergence of theory and practice was rare and transformative. Turing's role also highlighted a shift in the nature of warfare. Success was no longer determined solely by physical force, but by information dominance. Understanding the enemy's intentions before they acted created a powerful strategic advantage. Turing's work showed that battles could be won through intellect as much as through weapons. This realization would shape military and political thinking long after the war ended. Despite the importance of his contributions, Turing received little public recognition at the time. The secrecy surrounding Bletchley Park meant that his achievements remained hidden for decades. He continued his work without expectation of fame or reward, driven by a sense of duty and intellectual commitment. This quiet dedication reflected his character, focused on results rather than recognition. The psychological toll of this work should not be underestimated. Constant secrecy, long hours, and the awareness that lives depended on success placed enormous strain on those involved. Turing, like many others, carried this burden silently. He rarely spoke about his work outside the secure environment of Bletchley Park, even to those close to him. This isolation was the price of protecting one of the war's most valuable secrets. As the war neared its end, the impact of the Enigma breakthroughs became undeniable. Allied forces gained increasing confidence in their operations, supported by reliable intelligence. The steady flow of decoded messages helped accelerate the collapse of enemy resistance. While no single factor can explain the outcome of the war, historians now agree that codebreaking played a crucial role in shortening the conflict and reducing overall losses. For Alan Turing, the end of the war marked the conclusion of one chapter and the beginning of another. The skills he had developed under wartime pressure would soon be applied to new challenges in computing and artificial intelligence. Yet the Enigma challenge remained a defining experience. It tested his abilities to their limits and demonstrated the real-world power of abstract thinking. The Second World War and the struggle against Enigma stand as a powerful example of how human intellect can confront overwhelming complexity. Turing's contributions were not acts of sudden inspiration, but the result of years of disciplined thinking, logical rigor, and perseverance. He showed that even the most secure systems contain weaknesses, and that understanding those weaknesses requires both creativity and patience. In the broader story of history, Turing's wartime work represents a turning point. It revealed that information, computation, and logic would become central forces in the modern world. The methods developed to crack Enigma laid the groundwork for future technologies that now shape everyday life. From secure communications to digital computing, the echoes of this wartime effort are still felt today. In reflecting on the Enigma challenge and Turing's role within it, one truth stands out clearly. He was not merely reacting to circumstances, but redefining what was possible. Faced with a problem of unprecedented scale and urgency, he applied ideas that had never before been used in such a way. His success showed that even in the darkest moments of history, human reasoning can illuminate a path forward. Code-breaking at Bletchley Park stands as one of the most extraordinary intellectual efforts in modern history, and Alan Turing was at the heart of this secret operation. Located in the English countryside, Bletchley Park became Britain's central code-breaking headquarters during the Second World War. What appeared from the outside to be a quiet estate was, in reality, a place where some of the brightest minds of the time worked under intense pressure to uncover enemy secrets that could change the course of the war. When war began, Britain was intercepting vast numbers of encrypted German radio messages. These messages contained critical information about troop movements, naval operations, and military strategy. However, without the ability to read them, they were useless. The German Enigma machine, which encrypted these messages, was designed to be extremely secure. Its constantly changing settings created millions of possible combinations, making manual decryption nearly impossible. This challenge demanded a completely new approach to intelligence work. Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park with a background perfectly suited to the task. His deep understanding of mathematical logic and abstract systems allowed him to see encryption not as an unsolvable mystery, but as a logical process governed by rules. Instead of focusing on individual messages, Turing analyzed how the Enigma machine functioned as a system. He believed that if the system could be understood fully, its weaknesses could be exposed. One of the most important realizations at Bletchley Park was that even the most advanced machines depended on human operators. German radio operators, despite strict training, were not perfect. They repeated phrases, followed routines, and made small mistakes. These habits created predictable elements within the encrypted messages. Turing and his colleagues learned to exploit these patterns, using guessed words or phrases to test possible settings of the Enigma machine. These known elements became crucial starting points for breaking the code. To deal with the enormous number of possible Enigma settings, Turing helped design machines that could automate the testing process. These machines did not think, in a human sense, but they could rapidly eliminate impossible settings by checking them against logical constraints. This automation dramatically increased the speed of code breaking. What would have taken humans months could now be done in hours. This was a revolutionary moment, marking one of the earliest large-scale uses of machines to assist complex intellectual work. Life at Bletchley Park was intense and demanding. The work never stopped, as enemy messages were transmitted day and night. Teams worked in shifts, often under extreme time pressure. Information was only valuable if it could be used quickly. A decrypted message that arrived too late might save no one. Turing himself was known for his long hours and complete absorption in his work. He cared little for routines or formal behavior, focusing entirely on solving problems. Secrecy was absolute. Everyone at Bletchley Park understood that even a small leak could have disastrous consequences. Workers could not discuss their tasks outside the facility, even with family or close friends. This secrecy meant that many of Turing's achievements remained unknown for decades. While soldiers and commanders received public recognition, the codebreakers' victories stayed hidden, locked away under government secrecy laws. As the war progressed, the Germans continually improved their encryption methods. New Enigma routers were introduced, and procedures were changed to make decryption harder. This created a constant race between those securing the codes and those trying to break them. Each time the Germans upgraded their system, the team at Bletchley Park had to respond quickly with new ideas and methods. Turing played a vital role in adapting to these changes, refining techniques and developing new logical approaches. One of the most critical areas of code breaking involved naval communications. German submarines relied on encrypted messages to coordinate attacks on Allied shipping. When these messages were successfully decrypted, Allied forces could reroute convoys, avoid danger, and track enemy submarines. This intelligence saved countless lives and ensured the steady flow of supplies needed to continue the war. The success of these efforts depended heavily on the speed and accuracy of the work done at Bletchley Park. Despite the enormous pressure, collaboration was a key strength of the operation. Bletchley Park brought together mathematicians, linguists, engineers, and analysts, each contributing different skills. Turing was not only a brilliant thinker, but also someone whose ideas helped guide the overall strategy of code breaking. His logical clarity allowed teams to work more efficiently, focusing effort where it mattered most. The impact of code breaking at Bletchley Park went far beyond individual battles. By reading enemy communications, the Allies gained insight into German plans, strengths, and weaknesses. This intelligence influenced major strategic decisions and helped shorten the war. Although it is difficult to measure its exact effect, historians widely agree that code breaking significantly reduced the length and cost of the conflict. Perhaps the most lasting importance of Bletchley Park lies in its legacy. The methods developed there laid the foundations for modern computing and information security. The idea that machines could assist human reasoning on a large scale was proven under wartime conditions. Alan Turing's theoretical ideas about computation found practical application, showing how abstract logic could solve real-world problems with enormous consequences. In the end, code breaking at Bletchley Park was not just a technical achievement, but a human one. It demonstrated what could be accomplished when intelligence, creativity, and determination were combined under a shared purpose. Alan Turing's role in this effort revealed the power of the human mind to confront complexity and uncertainty. Though his work remained secret for many years, Its influence continues to shape the modern world, making Bletchley Park a symbol of quiet brilliance and unseen heroism. The birth of modern computing is inseparably linked to the ideas and work of Alan Turing. Long before computers became physical machines sitting on desks or fitting into pockets, Turing had already imagined their logical foundations. His contributions transformed computing from a vague mechanical concept into a rigorous scientific discipline. What makes his role so remarkable is that he helped create modern computing not by building machines at first, but by defining what computation itself truly means. Before Turing, machines were generally seen as tools designed for specific tasks. Calculators could add or subtract, and mechanical devices could automate limited processes, but there was no clear understanding of whether a single machine could perform many different kinds of calculations. Mathematics itself faced deep questions about its limits. Scholars were debating whether every mathematical problem could be solved by following a fixed set of logical rules. This intellectual environment set the stage for one of the most important breakthroughs in scientific history. Alan Turing approached this problem with a new kind of thinking. Instead of asking only whether problems could be solved, he asked how they were solved. He focused on the process of calculation itself. Turing imagined a simple theoretical device that could follow instructions step by step, manipulating symbols according to clear rules. This imaginary device, later called the Turing machine, was not meant to be built physically at the time. It was a conceptual model designed to capture the essence of computation. The power of this idea was extraordinary. Turing showed that this simple machine, despite its basic structure, could perform any calculation that could be described as a sequence of logical steps. In other words, a single general-purpose machine could, in theory, do the work of many specialized machines. This insight laid the foundation for the idea of programmable computers, where the same hardware can perform different tasks depending on the instructions it receives. Equally important was Turing's discovery that there are limits to computation. He proved that some problems cannot be solved by any machine that follows fixed rules, no matter how advanced it is. This result was not a failure, but a profound clarification. By defining the boundaries of what machines can and cannot do, Turing gave computing a solid theoretical foundation. Modern computer science still relies on these ideas to understand complexity, algorithms, and computational limits. The Second World War accelerated the transition from theory to practice. At Bletchley Park, the urgent need to break encrypted enemy messages pushed governments to invest in machines that could process information rapidly. Turing's earlier theoretical work proved unexpectedly practical. The machines developed for wartime codebreaking were among the earliest examples of automated computation applied at scale. They demonstrated that machines could assist human reasoning in complex tasks, a core principle of modern computing. After the war, Turing continued to shape the future of computing. He worked on designs for some of the first electronic computers, which moved beyond theory into physical reality. These machines stored instructions and data electronically, allowing them to perform tasks at unprecedented speed. The idea that a machine could store a program in memory and modify its behavior accordingly was directly connected to Turing's earlier concepts. One of Turing's most visionary contributions was his understanding that computers were not limited to numerical calculation. He believed they could manipulate symbols, process language, and simulate aspects of human thinking. This belief challenged the narrow view of machines as mere calculators. It opened the door to fields such as artificial intelligence, software engineering, and human-computer interaction. Modern computers, which handle text, images, sound, and video, are a direct realization of this broader vision. Turing also played a key role in changing how people thought about machines intellectually. Before him, machines were often viewed as rigid and unintelligent. Turing proposed that intelligence itself could be understood as a process, governed by rules and patterns. This idea did not reduce human intelligence, but rather provided a framework for studying it scientifically. His famous question, "Can machines think?" shifted computing from engineering into philosophy and cognitive science. The birth of modern computing was not a single moment, but a gradual transformation, and Turing's influence can be seen at every stage. His theoretical work defined computation. His wartime efforts demonstrated its power. His post-war ideas expanded its scope. Together, these contributions formed the backbone of the digital age. Every modern computer, from the largest supercomputer to the smallest smartphone, operates on principles that can be traced back to Turing's ideas. What makes Turing's role especially significant is that he combined imagination with precision. He did not merely dream about future machines. He described them with mathematical clarity. This combination allowed others to turn his ideas into working technology. Engineers built machines, programmers wrote software, and scientists developed new theories, all guided by the framework Turing had established. The impact of modern computing on society is immense. It has transformed communication, education, medicine, science, and entertainment. None of this would have been possible without a clear understanding of what computation is and how it can be performed efficiently. Alan Turing provided that understanding at a time when computers barely existed as physical objects. His work shows how powerful ideas can shape the future long before technology catches up. In the end, the birth of modern computing is a story of human thought as much as machinery. It is about asking fundamental questions, challenging assumptions, and daring to imagine new possibilities. Alan Turing's legacy in computing is not just technical, but intellectual. He showed that by understanding the logic of processes, humanity could build machines that extend the reach of the human mind. That insight continues to define the digital world we live in today. Artificial intelligence and the Turing test are deeply connected to Alan Turing's vision of how machines might one day imitate human thinking. Long before artificial intelligence became a popular or practical field, Turing was already asking questions that most people had never considered. He was not only interested in whether machines could calculate faster than humans, but whether they could display behaviors that we associate with intelligence itself. His ideas reshaped how scientists, philosophers, and engineers think about minds and machines. In the early 20th century, machines were generally viewed as rigid tools. They followed fixed instructions and performed narrow tasks. Intelligence, on the other hand, was considered a uniquely human quality, linked to consciousness, emotions, and creativity. Many people believed there was a clear and unbridgeable gap between humans and machines. Alan Turing challenged this belief by approaching intelligence from a logical perspective rather than an emotional or spiritual one. Turing asked a simple but powerful question: what do we really mean when we say something is intelligent? Instead of trying to define intelligence in abstract terms, he suggested focusing on observable behavior. If a machine could behave in a way that was indistinguishable from a human in certain situations, then it would be reasonable to describe that machine as intelligent. This practical approach avoided endless philosophical debates and replaced them with a testable idea. This line of thinking led to the creation of what is now known as the Turing test. The test is based on a thought experiment involving a human evaluator, a human participant, and a machine. The evaluator communicates with both the human and the machine through text, without seeing or hearing either of them. If, after extended interaction, the evaluator cannot reliably tell which one is the machine, then the machine is said to have demonstrated intelligent behavior. The key idea is not whether the machine thinks like a human internally, but whether it can convincingly act like one. The Turing test was revolutionary because it shifted the discussion of artificial intelligence away from internal mechanisms and toward external performance. Turing understood that we judge human intelligence largely by behavior. We assume other people think and feel not because we can see their minds, but because of how they communicate and act. By applying the same standard to machines, Turing created a fair and practical way to discuss machine intelligence. At the time Turing proposed this idea, computers were extremely limited. They filled entire rooms and were used mainly for numerical calculations. The suggestion that such machines could one day hold conversations or imitate human reasoning seemed unrealistic to many. Critics argued that machines could only follow instructions and lacked understanding, creativity, or awareness. Turing did not deny these differences, but he argued that complexity could emerge from simple rules. Just as human intelligence arises from biological processes, machine intelligence could arise from computational ones. Turing also anticipated many objections to artificial intelligence and addressed them directly. Some people claimed that machines could never be creative. Turing responded that creativity itself might be the result of following rules in new combinations. Others argued that machines could never make mistakes or learn from experience. Turing pointed out that machines could be designed to modify their behavior based on feedback, a concept that later became central to machine learning. One of Turing's most important insights was that intelligence does not have to be identical to human intelligence to be meaningful. A machine does not need emotions or consciousness identical to ours to perform intelligent tasks. What matters is its ability to reason, adapt, and respond appropriately to new situations. This idea opened the door for practical applications of artificial intelligence without requiring machines to fully replicate the human mind. Over time, Turing's ideas inspired generations of researchers. Artificial intelligence gradually developed into a scientific field focused on creating systems that can solve problems, recognize patterns, understand language, and learn from data. Early AI programs focused on logic and rule-based systems, reflecting Turing's emphasis on structured reasoning. Later approaches incorporated probability, statistics, and learning, further expanding the scope of machine intelligence. The Turing test itself has remained a central reference point in discussions of AI, even as technology has advanced. Some researchers see it as a useful benchmark for human-like communication, while others criticize it for focusing too much on imitation rather than true understanding. Despite these debates, the test continues to influence how people think about the relationship between humans and machines. It reminds us that intelligence is often judged socially and contextually, not just technically. In modern times, machines can perform tasks that once seemed impossible. They can translate languages, recognize faces, generate text, and assist in medical diagnosis. These achievements reflect the fulfillment of Turing's vision, even if they do not perfectly match the scenario he imagined. While many AI systems are specialized rather than general thinkers, they still demonstrate that machines can exhibit forms of intelligence through computation. Turing's work also raised important ethical and philosophical questions that remain relevant today. If machines can imitate human behavior convincingly, how should we treat them? How do we ensure that artificial intelligence is used responsibly? Turing did not provide final answers to these questions, but he laid the groundwork for asking them in a meaningful way. His focus on evidence, behavior, and logic continues to guide responsible discussion about AI. Perhaps the most lasting impact of the Turing test is its influence on how society understands intelligence itself. It challenges the idea that intelligence is a mysterious quality possessed only by humans. Instead, it suggests that intelligence can be studied, modeled, and potentially reproduced through systematic processes. This does not diminish human uniqueness, but it highlights the remarkable power of structured reasoning. In the end, artificial intelligence and the Turing test represent more than a scientific proposal. They represent a change in perspective. Alan Turing encouraged humanity to look at thinking as something that could be analyzed and explored, rather than feared or idealized. His ideas continue to shape technology, philosophy, and culture, proving that a question asked at the right time can influence the future for generations. Alan Turing's life was marked not only by extraordinary intellectual achievement, but also by deep personal struggles and profound injustice. While his contributions helped change the course of history and laid the foundations of the modern digital world, he lived in a society that failed to understand or accept him fully. The contrast between his public importance and private suffering reveals an important and painful chapter in the story of scientific progress and human rights. From an early age, Turing was different from those around him. He was socially awkward, intensely focused on ideas, and uninterested in many social conventions. These traits made him stand out in schools and academic institutions that valued conformity and tradition. Although his brilliance was undeniable, he was often misunderstood, teased, or dismissed as eccentric. This sense of being an outsider followed him throughout his life and shaped many of his personal experiences. One of the most significant sources of injustice in Turing's life came from the social and legal attitudes of his time. Mid-20th century Britain enforced strict laws that criminalized same-sex relationships. These laws reflected widespread prejudice rather than scientific or moral understanding. Turing, like many others, lived in a society where simply being oneself could lead to punishment and public disgrace. This created a constant tension between his private identity and public life. Despite his vital wartime service, Turing was not protected from these laws. His work at Bletchley Park remained classified for decades, meaning that even those who benefited most from his contributions were unaware of them. When he later became the target of legal action because of his personal life, the state treated him not as a national hero, but as a criminal. This remains one of the most striking examples of how unjust systems can ignore individual merit and sacrifice. The consequences of this treatment were severe. Turing faced official punishment that affected his career, his reputation, and his sense of dignity. He lost access to certain types of work and was placed under intense scrutiny. For a man whose life revolved around intellectual freedom and creativity, this loss of trust and autonomy was deeply damaging. The injustice was not only legal, but psychological, as it sent a clear message that his identity made him unworthy of respect. What makes this injustice even more tragic is that it occurred during a period when Turing was continuing to make important scientific contributions. He was working on early computing systems, mathematical biology, and questions about artificial intelligence. Instead of being supported and celebrated, he was isolated and constrained by laws rooted in fear and misunderstanding. Society benefited from his mind while simultaneously rejecting him as a person. Turing's personal struggles were not limited to legal persecution. He also dealt with loneliness and emotional pain throughout his life. His difficulty with social interaction, combined with the need to hide parts of his identity, made close relationships hard to maintain. While he formed friendships and professional connections, he often felt emotionally isolated. This isolation was not the result of personal failure, but of a society that did not allow him to live openly and safely. It is important to understand that Turing's struggles were not unique to him. Many talented individuals of his time faced similar treatment, particularly those who did not fit accepted social norms. What sets Turing's story apart is the scale of his contribution compared to the severity of the injustice he endured. His experience highlights how discrimination can harm not only individuals, but society as a whole by suppressing human potential. For many years after his death, Turing's story remained incomplete. His wartime work was secret, and the injustice he suffered was rarely discussed publicly. As a result, generations benefited from technologies based on his ideas without knowing the personal cost he paid. When his contributions finally became widely known, they forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about how he was treated. In later years, public attitudes began to change. Advances in human rights, greater understanding of diversity, and a reevaluation of historical wrongs led to renewed attention to Turing's life. He came to be recognized not only as a scientific pioneer, but also as a symbol of the harm caused by discrimination. This recognition was long overdue, but it played an important role in reshaping how history remembers him. Turing's story now serves as a powerful reminder that progress in science and technology must be matched by progress in ethics and compassion. Intellectual brilliance does not protect individuals from injustice if society's values are flawed. His life challenges us to ask difficult questions about how many other voices were silenced or damaged by prejudice, and what humanity lost as a result. Today, Alan Turing is honored for his achievements, and his legacy is celebrated worldwide. Yet honoring him fully also means acknowledging the suffering he endured and learning from it. His personal struggles reveal the human cost of intolerance and the importance of creating societies where people are judged by their character and contributions, not by who they are. In remembering Turing, we remember more than a great mind. We remember a person who gave immeasurably to the world while being denied fairness and understanding in return. His life stands as both an inspiration and a warning. Brilliance can change history, but justice is what allows humanity to move forward together. Alan Turing's lasting legacy and global impact are monumental, extending far beyond the achievements of a single lifetime. While his work during the Second World War and his foundational contributions to mathematics and computing are widely recognized, the true measure of Turing's influence lies in how his ideas have shaped the modern world, science, technology, and even social consciousness. His legacy is multifaceted, encompassing intellectual, technological, and cultural dimensions, and continues to inspire generations across the globe. One of the most significant aspects of Turing's legacy is his role as the father of modern computing. Before Turing, the concept of a universal machine capable of performing any calculation was largely theoretical. With the introduction of the Turing machine, he provided a clear framework for understanding what computation is and how it can be formalized. This conceptual breakthrough laid the groundwork for the digital revolution, influencing computer architecture, programming languages, and software design. Today, every computer, smartphone, and digital device operates on principles that trace back directly to Turing's work. Without his theoretical vision, the modern era of technology would look vastly different. Turing's wartime work at Bletchley Park is another cornerstone of his enduring impact. By designing methods and machines to crack the German Enigma code, he not only contributed to shortening the Second World War, but also demonstrated the immense practical power of computational thinking. His wartime innovations anticipated modern computing long before commercial or academic computers existed. The machines developed under his guidance can be seen as precursors to the programmable computers that followed. The practical success of these machines illustrated that abstract theoretical ideas could be applied to solve real-world problems, a lesson that continues to influence engineering, cybersecurity, and algorithmic research. Beyond computing, Turing's vision extended to the field of artificial intelligence. By asking the question, "Can machines think?" and proposing the Turing test as a way to evaluate machine intelligence, he laid the conceptual foundation for AI research. Decades later, artificial intelligence has become a central part of technology and society, from voice assistants and autonomous vehicles to advanced data analysis and medical diagnostics. The Turing test remains a reference point in evaluating AI, reminding researchers that intelligence is not just about raw computation, but about the ability to simulate human-like reasoning and behavior. In this sense, Turing's influence reaches into the ethical and philosophical dimensions of technology, prompting ongoing discussions about the role of machines in human life. Turing's influence is also felt in science beyond computing and artificial intelligence. He made contributions to mathematical biology, particularly in the study of morphogenesis, the process by which patterns and shapes develop in living organisms. His work demonstrated that mathematical models could explain complex natural phenomena, bridging the gap between abstract mathematics and empirical science. Today, researchers in fields ranging from genetics to ecology continue to draw upon Turing's methods to understand patterns in nature, highlighting the breadth of his intellectual reach. Another element of Turing's legacy is cultural and social. For many years, his achievements were hidden due to wartime secrecy and social prejudice. His persecution due to his sexual orientation and the injustice he suffered as a result have become a powerful symbol of the consequences of intolerance. In recent decades, his life story has inspired discussions on human rights, equality, and the treatment of LGBTQ+ individuals. Governments, institutions, and organizations around the world now recognize Turing as not only a scientific genius, but also a symbol of resilience, courage, and the human cost of discrimination. The posthumous pardons, commemorations, and public awareness campaigns highlight how his personal story has contributed to a broader social impact beyond his scientific contributions. Turing's legacy also profoundly influences education and research. Universities around the world teach computer science, artificial intelligence, and mathematical logic based on principles he first articulated. Academic conferences, research programs, and scholarships carry his name, inspiring young scientists to explore new frontiers of knowledge. His approach, combining abstract thought with practical application, rigor with creativity, serves as a model for how scientific inquiry can be both innovative and deeply meaningful. In this way, Turing's intellectual influence continues to guide the education and development of future generations. Internationally, Turing's impact is truly global. His work has shaped not only British scientific progress, but also the worldwide technological landscape. Innovations in computing, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity, all of which rely on the foundations he established, are integral to modern economies, global communication networks, and scientific research. The principles he discovered have crossed national boundaries, enabling collaboration and advancement on a scale that few individuals in history have achieved. His influence is embedded in every device connected to the Internet, every encrypted message transmitted securely, and every algorithm that powers modern software. Finally, Turing's legacy extends into philosophy and the way humanity thinks about intelligence and the mind. By questioning the boundaries between human and machine, he challenged centuries of assumptions about thought, consciousness, and creativity. Philosophers, cognitive scientists, and AI researchers continue to grapple with the questions he posed, such as the nature of intelligence and whether it can be replicated artificially. Turing's work serves as a bridge between empirical science and philosophical inquiry, showing that deep questions about the mind can have practical, technological, and ethical implications. In conclusion, Alan Turing's lasting legacy and global impact are vast and multifaceted. He fundamentally changed the way we understand computation, created practical tools that influence the outcome of global conflict, and laid the foundations for artificial intelligence and digital technology. His work in mathematical biology expanded the reach of mathematics into understanding the natural world, while his personal story highlights the social injustices that can accompany brilliance in an intolerant society. His ideas continue to shape education, research, industry, and philosophy worldwide. From theoretical concepts to practical applications, from societal reflection to global technological advancement, Turing's influence remains both profound and enduring. He is a figure whose life and work remind humanity that intellect, creativity, and courage can leave an indelible mark on the world.